As the last to bat, the last batsman is usually the weakest. But in the face of the fiery spell by the Honorable Anil Nandlall, I shall have to hold my wicket because I find myself diametrically opposed to his ideas. I'd like to thank the university for your kind invitation to rise despite the fact that we are still very much embryonic. We're here, and your title says, to court brave change or leave well enough alone. We didn't come for the leave well enough alone part. Our society is divided. Our democracy is stagnant. To grow and realize our potential, RISE is advocating for and asks that you embrace transformational change. We have listened to the representative of the youths here tonight speak about the list system, if I remember exactly what she said. But I do believe that she wanted to address really a constituency system. And similar sentiments were expressed by the representative of the indigenous peoples, or First Peoples, I prefer. And even Mr. Vincent Alexander spoke about greater latitude to choose representatives. RISE is a radical organization. In what we want to put forward tonight, we have had discussions with several groups. And in our discussions, it is what has emerged is people want to hear what are the changes that we have in mind for constitutional reform. And the first and most important change that we fearlessly want to put forward is that we must throw away the system of proportional representation and replace it with a constituency system. Many have spoken glowingly about the work of the 1999 Constitutional Reform Commission, of whom there are several members here. And whilst much was accomplished, we believe that that commission erred when it recommended, and I quote, the electoral system should remain that of proportional representation. The recent report, UN report, to which the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources referred, has stated, Guyana has, and I open quotation, Guyana has tolerated over 35 years of a constitution that is hyper-presidential and an electoral system that provides little accountability between representative and constituent. My interpretation of this is that even the UN report is hinting that we must be prepared to embrace radical change. In our discussions with the man in the street, with members of the government, members of the opposition, Guyanese in the diaspora, as you review commentary on social media and letters in the press, they all reveal they all have several calls are made for us to return to a constituency system. We feel that whatever the process for constitutional reform, and it's now with the Parliamentary Standing Commission on Constitutional Reform, that this question must not be avoided, but it must be put to the electorate in a referendum. It is time for the expert working groups to stop saying that proportional representation is okay, and for us to put this to the people for a decision. And RISE will campaign for a return to a constituency system. Concomitant with a return to a constituency system, we must have individual involvement in politics. Currently, the Constitution only allows parties to run for the National Assembly. Once we return to a constituency system, individuals will obviously should be, not obviously, but should be allowed to run. We must have a repeal of the list system, and we must facilitate post-election coalitions. All of these steps, we believe, taken together, would reinvigorate our democracy. Now, many argue that the rest of the Caribbean, for example, Trinidad, perhaps have some of the same problems that we have. I would like to point out that in terms of per capita income, Guyana stands only above, the last time I checked, only above Haiti. And I do believe that that has been a result of our moving away from a representative democracy. The issue of enforcement is another one that attracts our attention. In 1997, Esther Pereira filed an elections petition that was never determined until 2001. The AFC filed a petition in 2006 over the seat in Region 10, and that took quite a few years to be determined. I don't think it was determined before the next election. And currently, the PPP has an election petition in court that has not been determined as well. RISE is also strongly advocating for a constitutional court. We propose, and we're going a little further, because we just don't want to call for a court, but we're proposing in another radical way, a constitutional court that will be made up of at least 5 judges, with a minimum of 2 appellate judges and 3 from the High Court. The quorum for this court will be 3 judges, of which at least one will be an appellate court judge, and that for appeals from the Constitutional Court to go directly to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. If such a court were in existence, the arguments over the 2-term limit and the arguments over the chairmanship of the correct interpretation of the chairmanship of GCOM, the elections petition from 1999, all of these things would have been settled in short order. We would also like to call for parliamentary confirmation hearings for those constitutional offices like the Chancellor of the Judiciary, the Chief Justice, Commissioner of Police, DPP, etc. We have received complaints about the kinds of questions that border on sexism when people are interviewed for the position of judges. So we believe that if we move to public hearings in Parliament, that those types of questions will not be asked. And we will get a better sense, for example, if it's a hearing for a Commissioner of Police, he will be able to share with us, and maybe other candidates, what their ideas are for improving our current crime situation. The German court, the German Constitutional Court, adopts a similar measure, and they require, I think, a 60% majority for confirmation of the entire Parliament. And we do believe that it's this broad-based appointment process that is the reason for the high respect with which that German court is held. Further, in the trust to reinvigorate our democracy, we would like the public to have a right to propose legislation, probably on a petition of 20,000 votes. We would like to see, and this is quite controversial, participation of the diaspora. That means dual citizens running for seats in the National Assembly, providing they have been resident in Guyana for the last 3 to 5 years before the election. The 1999 Commission recommended limitations on the number of technocrat ministers and parliamentary secretaries. Effect was given to this recommendation by Article 1033, whereby not more than 4 ministers and 2 parliamentary secretaries may be so appointed. This, to our mind, restricts the President's ability to involve competent persons from civil society in the process of government, and it should be repealed. On the issue of presidential immunities, we would like to see them reduced further. They were reduced by the 2001 process. We would like to see them reduced further so that the President becomes clearly answerable, as all the rest of us are, for acts personal and official once he demits office. Campaign financing. We have recently heard from a minister that it's probably very difficult and unworkable for us to have legislation on campaign financing. I will steal a phrase from the Honorable Anil Nandlall. I think not. The political system in Guyana favors the established political parties. The ability of governing parties to hand out contracts and to co-opt resources of the state generally gives them an overall advantage. We propose that at minimum, all donations above a certain threshold, perhaps 50,000, should be disclosed. Donations from foreign citizens and businesses should be illegal. We would not like Exxon, perhaps, to try to buy an election. And there should be independent audits. There should be independent audits of the records of all individuals, political parties, and political action committees participating in national elections. Violations should result in forfeiture of seats and imprisonment. Sovereign Wealth Fund, and I would like to assure the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources that my reference to Exxon and the Sovereign Wealth Fund is is not meant an attack on him, but we believe that the Constitution should spell out details on the Sovereign Wealth Fund. What percentage of the revenues from the oil should go to the Sovereign Wealth Fund? What the nature of investments? Should they be allowed to invest in weapons manufacturers, for example? The nature of those investments and the criteria for withdrawal should be entrenched in the Constitution so that any future government cannot easily change that which is the inheritance of future Guyanese. RISE is concerned that, similar to the 1994 process, that unless those on the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Constitutional Reform move post-haste, that we will end up with the 2020 elections and all of the work being done in vain. Okay, I'm told I have 2 minutes to go, so I'll wrap this up. A reformed constitution is just the beginning of our work. A recent article by Michaela Pandey in the Trinidad Guardian stated that a well-written constitution must be maintained by living, breathing persons who must themselves be guided by and act in accordance with a code of conduct that enhances, not undermines, the institution that they manage. Her thesis was that we inherited from the Westminster, our constitution from Westminster, and abandoned the unwritten conventions. With every passing year since independence, our connection to Westminster weakens, and with it has become the conduct of our politicians has declined, and so has our Guyanese civilization. It is time for all of you, civil society, to rise up, and rise in capital R-I-S-E, and demand the kind of transformational change that will give us the society that we should be proud of. The subtitle of tonight's discussion reminds us of the book by Dr. Tyrone Ferguson, To Survive Sensibly, or To Court Heroic Death. The real politic will cause those political parties, the established political parties, to reject our proposals for transformational change. We ask that you demand that they embrace the concept of transformational change, and we ask them to put Guyana first this one time and place these proposals before the electorate in a referendum. In doing so, Guyana will survive sensibly, even as they court heroic death. I thank you.